Hey everyone, welcome back to Electoral Dysfunction, the show where comedians and experts debate the news of the week from the safety of their quarantine. I'm your host, Tom Brennan. Thank you for joining us for another week. We sat down to record today just as some sad news broke that Regis Philbin has died. And it's sad, you know, he was 89 and all things must come to an end. But to his family and loved ones, very sorry for your loss. I remember as a kid, my grandmother would always watch Regis. And no matter how much I wanted to watch cartoons or Wings reruns on USA, we had to watch Regis first. And that became a thing I did whenever I was down in Cape May, New Jersey in summer vacation. I remember, I equate summertime with Regis. So it's very sad news. He's off to that talk show, Guest Couch in the Sky. We got a great show today. Very excited to have you with us. Great panel talking about Florida, Portland, and the throwdown in Congress between Ted Yoho and AOC. But before we get to that, I just want to say a quick thank you to this week's guest, director, editor, packager, pal, Brian Colvin, for joining us. Ned Thorne, our regular guy, is taking a much-deserved vacation. Ned, enjoy your vacation. Brian, thank you for joining us. Thank you for helping us out. And may this be the first time I say to you, Brian, star wipe me to the panel. And join me in welcoming this week's panel. First up, he is a very funny comedian and writer. Someone please hire Andrew Kimler. Hey, Andrew, how are you?
I'm surviving the apocalypse as best I can. How you doing?
I'm doing well and the same, as best as I can, which is relative with each passing day. Next up, very funny comedian and writer as well, host of the Revolution podcast, which is upcoming, combining conversation and activism. Kate Moran is back. Hey, Kate, how are you?
Hi, dreaming of burning it all down. The usual.
That's a dream that used to be a sad dream, and now it's a really happy one.
It helps me sleep at night.
Oh man, I've just figured out my new secret for trying to sleep. You can catch her every Tuesday night at Musical Megawatt on Magnet's Twitch page with her team Aunt Darla. Ladies and gentlemen, Ann Herberger. Hey Ann, how are you?
I'm great. Hi everybody. Just surviving COVIDio one day at a time.
Oh man, it's that's all we can do. Just wake up every day and remember one more day just like this.
Yeah.
A lot of patience. And finally, editorial columnist for the New York Daily News, my buddy, my pal, my lifelong chum, Robert George. Hey, Robert, how are you?
Hey, doing okay, Tom. Doing okay. Just taking it one day at a time, like everybody else.
Like an AA meeting.
Well,
like an AA meeting. Yes, exactly.
I hope everyone's ready for this podcast / AA meeting. That's all we're doing today. So to get it out of the way at the top, person, woman, man, camera, TV. That is very funny. The president bragging about a dementia test. It was weird. In any other week in America, that would be the top story. But this week, there was part of me that was like, at least he took a test. The least bad thing he could do.
It's what once again we're all caught up in our little liberal bubble. It's what the president's supporters have been saying for 3.5 years now. This president is playing third dementia chess, and we just don't understand. We just don't understand quite where he's coming from.
Oh man!
And he came out of the box early.
Yeah, that's Robert George right off the break. It's going to be a textbook game out of this play.
The crowd came wild,
but
there's no crowd.
Yeah, we're going to start bringing flags to throw on the field for every time you make a pun. So let's move on. So I was thinking this week, over in Earth 2, in my definition, is just where COVID-19 didn't become a full-blown pandemic. So over there, the Democratic National Convention just wrapped up, I believe, this week or the week before last. It was originally supposed to be in late July. We at Electoral Dysfunction are finalizing our plans for our trip to Charlotte to do a live show at Petra's. Amazing. If you're ever in Charlotte, if places ever reopen, head to Plaza Midwood, go to Petra's. Great little bar and restaurant, or bar and cabaret space, to do some live shows. We had some great guests lined up during the Republican National Convention in late August. That is the way things happen in Earth 2. Here in Earth 1, of course, it was moved from Charlotte, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida. until this week, where President Trump announced that it would not be, with the rising COVID-19 numbers in the state of Florida, it would not be safe or responsible to do live events there. So the business of the convention will continue in offices at Charlotte, and he nobly decided to cancel the big rallies. He'll be doing some virtual speeches and virtual events, which I found interesting because, well, at the same time that he was saying it was not safe to do a convention in Florida, Ron DeSantis, a proud, I'd say, Trump Republican down in governor of Florida, is currently in court with many school districts in the state of Florida because Florida has demanded that all schools be open for in-person learning every day of the week this fall. The president and his administration are also saying reopen the schools, although to his credit, at his press conference this week, Trump did sort of open the door to virtual learning a little bit, but he's still very adamant about the schools. There's still no plan coming from the Department of Education on how to facilitate this. It's a very, you're on your own, and if you want this funding, come up with a plan, but they can't really come up with a plan without the funding. So all this happens while yesterday, we are shooting on Saturday, Friday the 24th, we saw 74,000 new cases of COVID-19 across the country. Medical experts predict if things continue on the trend we're in, by election day, there will be 200,000 people dead of COVID-19 in the United States. So,
but our president knows what an elephant looks like.
That's true.
Remember
So
that.
I'm still not convinced he didn't get the answers in advance.
yeah. Oh man, he's got an inside guy at the.
All I know is he didn't
Ronnie
brag about
Jackson.
beating impeachment half as much as he's bragged about beating a cognitive
Right.
test that a 6-year-old would ace.
It's very disconcerting. It's very disconcerting. But I'd say the question I have now is, it seems like with the situation with COVID-19, there's almost like, I feel like in previous weeks, there's been disagreements on whether or not it's getting worse. And those disagreements have been highly political and not particularly based in logic. We now seem to all be on the same page that it's getting worse. Dr. Bricks, who is of the president's advisors, the one he seems to least hate, has said that I forget how many states, but at least Texas and Florida, three, that it was Texas, Florida, and was it Arizona was the third one?
Yeah.
That she compared to right now being in the same place that New York State was at its absolute worst.
3 New Yorks. The
what's
three
that?
New Yorks. She said,
Three New
she
Yorks.
called them, she said it's like 3 New Yorks. Exactly.
Yes. And New York at its absolute worst was pretty bad. So the question is, like, where are we with this crisis right now? It seems like now it seems like everyone, even Trump a little bit, is like, yeah, I guess it's getting worse, but it'll go away eventually. But no one is as positive as we were. Even this week, Mitch McConnell opened the door to another stimulus bill, which he has pushed off until this point. It seems like we're admitting it, but we're still doing nothing.
Yeah, well, for one thing, we have the CDC is now not reporting all that data, right? It's all going through the White House.
Correct.
So it's all guesswork at this point. We don't really know what's going on, but the numbers still look bad, like no matter how you cut it. So yeah, I don't know. All I know is a lot of people are dying and no one seems to care up top,
Death, the death rates, which, as we all know, are lagging indicators, but those numbers are now going up, as Andrew said. I think they've basically been for the last 3 or 4 days, depending when somebody watches this. It's about 1,000. It's about 1,000 a day. Which of course reflects the surge that we saw 2 or 3 weeks ago in hospitalizations in Florida, Texas, and Arizona. The positivity rate in terms of testing apparently is slowing down in Arizona, but slowing down means it's getting down to like 10% or 11%, 9 or 10%. Which is completely and totally unacceptable. As an example, New York, which, as we know, was hit the hardest and still has the highest death count. since we've gotten it under control over the last month to 6 weeks, our the positivity is between 1% and 2%. So that's what we're talking about. And you mentioned Dr. Birx. The big news was what had been announced publicly, which was she said that those 3 states are all are like 3 New Yorks. What was not publicized as much, but somebody got a leaked phone call, was her talking about the outbreaks in 11 cities, which including Baltimore, Indianapolis, and several others. Yeah, it's awful across the Southwest. Well, the Southwest and Florida and so forth. But there are these outbreaks across the country, and the president admitted that it's going to get worse before it gets better, but otherwise there's no real direction coming from the White House.
Can we unpack let's maybe unpack a larger thought process of this? For me, especially as I'm watching, us flatten the curve in New York, where it was stunningly awful here, and all these other states, friends of mine in other states going, well, it's just New York, it's just this, who are now, especially friends in Florida, seeing what could have really been thwarted. The Netherlands did a study, basically 3 things to flatten the curve: wear a mask, social distance, if you're sick, stay home. And this study included like 2,000 people to prove their point that this could have been avoided. So what is the role of the federal government? What's the role of the state government? To me, and we're seeing this in the polling, and again, I know what you're going to say, it's the end of July, it's not October, but I think we're starting to see some trends that line up with other election cycles of where Trump is bottoming out and where Biden is rising. The American people just want somebody to acknowledge and say, this is happening, number 1. Number 2, the federal government is there to take care of its citizens. It doesn't mean that you have to take care of every single issue with its citizens, but when tragedy strikes, that's why we have FEMA, that's why we now have the Department of Homeland Security, whether you like it or not, and we can certainly talk about Portland and the policing actions of the department, but this is what the federal government's supposed to do. This is why money is set aside to help states with unemployment. It was indicative to me early on in this crisis when Trump said, let the states handle it. Well, this is why we also have states' rights, and this is why the teachers union in Florida is suing Ron DeSantis to not have to go back to school. It isn't because they don't want kids to be there. It's because Florida has 20 times the national average in cases right now, and every ICU bed, except for maybe 2 hospital districts in Florida, is full. There are no more ICU beds. What our greatest fears are that this was going to keep going is now handling. And, again, I'm no fan of Donald Trump, but all he had to do to quell this was acknowledge a few things. People need to wear masks. It's not infringing on your constitutional rights to do that, because where are we responsible to one another, not necessarily for one another, but to one another as human beings. And this is his Vietnam. I truly believe Biden's numbers are going to continue to rise just because he is proposing empathy to the people like all of us who have been hit with unemployment as well. For the Republicans, and this is the reason I think the Senate is going to go to the Democrats. The Republicans in the Senate have done nothing to acknowledge their own constituents' pain, and in states where this virus has hurt people the most. So what is the federal government's role? It is to protect its citizens, and it has failed miserably. Those in leadership have failed miserably.
Absolutely. I think that's why also we didn't stand a fighting chance from the beginning, because if you look at the studies of other countries that have combated COVID-19 successfully, one of the things in common was the citizens trusting the authority of the government, trusting their governments to protect them and provide for them and provide them with most up-to-date, accurate information, where we have an administration that won and rules on the premise of misinformation. No one knows what to believe. I was talking to a friend who lives in Arizona now, and she was like, oh, nurses are being furloughed. It's fine. It's slowing down here. And I was like, just because you haven't directly seen someone get COVID-19 doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You might not have access to like a ton of money or people of color or Jesus, but you believe that exists, right? Like, it's still there.
Right.
Yeah.
God.
I think one of the reasons that states like Florida are trying so hard to get kids back to school is because, for lack of a better term, they don't care. Kids don't vote. It's not going to affect them if they send kids back to school, or at least they don't see how it affects them. Whereas they'll go ahead and they'll cancel a rally down there because that will impact voters. I think it's very short-sighted. I don't think they are thinking it through. And I think, Anne, you're right. I think the trends are just going to continue. We're going to see a major wipeout in November if they continue down this road. And I don't see them changing course because that's not what they do, or at least that's not what Trump does. And the Republican Party is framed itself in such a way right now that they'll never be dissent.
Well,
by the way, I
just want to quickly pivot off Andrew's point there. Like, kids don't vote, their parents do. They seem, it is interesting that, like, I think the thought process is, oh, parents are overwhelmed. They need to work and take care of the kids. We'll show them we have their backs. Let's reopen the schools. Except the polling has found that, most parents are not comfortable with just sending their kids back to school just yet, because they presumably love their children. Never been a parent.
Also,
I don't know.
teachers vote, adult staff vote. Like,
Right.
there are adults who work in the education system that are going to be at risk.
Well, there are two things, and pivoting off of something Andrew said, and then something Ann said. Tom, when he opened this up, when he opened up the show, he talked about what was happening on Earth 2, and the thing is, it's not as if Earth 2 had to have been presided. The president was necessarily Hillary Clinton, because what I'm trying to say here is what's happening here is not ideological as we traditionally think of ideology. Can you imagine, would precisely the same thing be happening if it was President Chris Christie or President Jeb Bush? The answer is no, because forget about how you feel about Republican ideology or things like that. Christie and Bush are idea of responsible, competent, get the job done type of Republicans, and other Republicans other Republican governors who were presiding, whether it was a DeSantis or a Kemp, would have on that Earth too, would have said, oh, okay, this is the Republican president is suggesting masks, is suggesting these close downs, and we would have had a unified national response going on
100%.
at the same time. And unfortunately, we have an uncontrolled narcissist who has turned the GOP generally into a cult that completely and totally follows his wishes and commands, whereas as Andrew said, there's no dissent, and that's why we have the continually unfolding disaster that we're in right now. And the one other point is the reason why parents and teachers do not want to go back to school or ready to have in-person instruction is they have seen this president at every step of the way been wrong on how this virus has unfolded. He was wrong when it first landed. He was wrong on the timing of reopening, and now he expects parents and teachers and so forth to trust him on the timing for when schools are reopening? No.
We also have no funding. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Anne.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, even it, I know that some teachers were sent around like packets or whatever from the government detailing how to, have best practices for in-person schooling, but we don't have any of the money or resources. Teachers have to use their own paychecks to even buy fucking markers, pardon my language. So it's like, how are we going to make sure that students in public schools can stay 6 feet apart when classrooms are already overcrowded? The government's not providing any financial assistance to both individuals, small businesses, and schools. So, like, even if you're right, like if we had another Republican president, there might have still been a lot of misinformation because we're still learning about this virus. Everyone is. But hopefully maybe we would have at least had some sort of more organized financial assistance in place.
I mean, we do have the money. We just dumped it. I think Tom said this on Twitter the other day. Someone did. We dumped $1 trillion into the stock market on like the first day and lost it. Like, we have the money. We just don't want to spend it.
Yeah, it's what's frustrating is like they've said as much, with the official position of McConnell and Graham on why they are hesitant to just provide direct cash payments or re-up the $600 a week that expires, I believe, at the end of this past week that we just went through, is they don't want to condition people to stay home.
This coming Friday. The 600
it ends the 30th,
this coming Friday.
July 31st, yeah.
The eviction moratorium, though, expired on Friday, this past Friday. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well.
And can I make one comment too? Having worked 7 conventions and
oh my God.
for them.
Oof, thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you. The governor of North Carolina looks like a genius, number one. Number two, knowing these guys in Jacksonville like I do, because they were all donors of mine, the internal pressure that was coming from the city of Jacksonville, the sheriff's department, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the venues, there was no other answer than to cancel this. And again, this is where I like to also think of myself as a student of politics, because this has been my world for 20 some years. But just watching the Democrats make a decision early on to do a virtual convention and watching the Republicans flail with this. And there was a tweet this morning that Ronna McDaniel, who is the chairman of the RNC, they are flailing because all of this money went to North Carolina. All of this money went to Jacksonville. And they're not spending it now, and costs have been incurred, and they've got to make good on those. The committee needs to make good on what they've expended. But the Trump is now basically flipping the middle bird to all the down ballot races and not understanding why those races are important. So every single thing that if you had a handbook for the Republicans on how to lose every single race in the country, they're following it chapter and verse.
And all the money. Remember, and I think it was the Washington Post revealed how much money that was going to the convention and going to the RNC has been funneled into Trump's personal properties. So yeah. I mean, the donors, the donors and the parties are getting screwed half a dozen ways. I mean,
I have to say, not being a fan of Donald Trump's at all, as a lifelong Democrat, it is nice to watch him completely fleece your party. Like, I have to say, it's like...
You gotta give the man some props, Like he stays true to his brand.
Talking about Earth 2 and all, it's like whenever there's a big, like, Lex Luthor puts together a Legion of Doom and then the Joker fucks it all up for him. Like, that's how I feel right now.
Right.
I'm like, that guy's still dangerous, but it's pretty great how he blew up Black Manta's ship. As a joke for Robert and Andrew. Anyway, but there is one way that, as Ann said, perhaps he's fucking this up in the down ballot races, but certainly if Donald Trump is reelected this fall, one thing that will probably be part of how he gets reelected is the chaos in the streets. He's putting out a lot of video ads of Joe Biden's America, which is looks a lot like what's currently happening in Donald Trump.
Donald Trump's America.
How does he know? How does he get that footage?
Just unreal.
Well, the guy's rich. He got in that Bill and Ted phone booth. Just went to the speaker.
He's got an Alamy account. He can afford the stock footage.
Oh my God.
But currently still in Portland after 7 weeks of ongoing protests that, as we discussed last week on the show, we're starting to die down. But we're starting to die down and starting to, or at least become a little less violent, a little more organized, a little more peaceful. And in came the Department of Homeland Security and a lot of border and customs people to famous border city, Portland, Oregon.
U.S. Marshals too. U.S. Marshals
as well. Because graffiti against federal buildings cannot stand. And our test run of secret police began with the president saying this week that he may send them to Chicago and Philadelphia, and New York, and any other cities if they need them, because it looks like
Albuquerque. Don't forget Albuquerque.
New Mexico, the big three, the big four.
The hot spot.
Why have a secret police when you can have a public police?
That's right. But that is continuing to ramp up, and my question then is this: I think that I look at that situation in Portland, and then also Robert brought to our attention right before we started recording the situation in Louisville, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in a moment. But I look at that situation, and I'm of two minds. On the one hand, my thought is, if you send, for lack of a better word, secret police into a city, and the response is for a group of, predominantly white suburban moms to come join the protest,
Right.
then I am not confident, like most presidential elections are won by whoever can persuade the middle of the country. I am not confident that President Trump is persuading the middle of the country. At the same time, this sort of quick authoritarian power grab in a year where we're in an election year, at a point in time where, as Robert mentioned on previous week shows, we've already seen in New York how long it took for congressional races to get settled based off of the complications of voting in a pandemic. That sort of apparatus existing in a presidential election year makes me very nervous about, my father said to me earlier today, if the election's fair, Joe Biden's going to win. And we both agreed that is a big if.
Yeah.
And I look at this situation in Portland, and it seems, we talked about this last week, and I'm more and more convinced, based off of our friend Rex Hupke's commentary, that this is a test run for having an apparatus in place to try and perhaps scare people into staying home, in addition to the video footage that he hopes will help get him campaign ads, to help scare people into staying home, help sow discord in the streets, intimidate people away from voting, intimidate people from being involved. What do we think? What about the current climate in terms of these going?
Well, the protests only, I mean, at this point, the police presence and the protests, it's all very intentional, I think, on the part of Donald Trump. I think he sees this kind of tension and division in the streets as being very advantageous to him, because he can foster this violence as much as he can, or these protests, this friction as much as he can, and then just offer himself as being the only solution to it. I think that's, based on the writing of the wall, probably what he views as his best chances to win fairly. But I don't see that as working in his favor, which is why it seems like he's ramping up his efforts to try to bankrupt the USPS as quickly as he can before Election Day as well. So it is a battle on multiple fronts in order to try to have a fair election, right? It's not just getting people to the polls, it's making sure that all of the avenues to a free and fair election are available to people. It's not just the protests on the street, it's also the protests going on in post offices and other places around the country. Things that are going to affect the election in ways that we're probably still not even thinking about.
It's a problematic doesn't even begin to really describe what's going on. I'm going to go back a dozen years right now, 2008, 2008 into 2009. Barack Obama gets elected. Excuse me. For several weeks, months, in 2008 into 2009, Fox News running footage of these 2 or 3 members of the Black Panther Party that were standing outside of a polling place in Philadelphia, and they had like billy clubs in their on the side of their belt, and this became a big thing that the Black Panthers were intimidating voters into voting for Barack Obama. Well, first of all, if this was like in the city of Philadelphia, you probably didn't really need that intimidation to vote for Barack Obama in 2008. Just saying, right?
Certainly not in the inner city. Maybe in the Northeast. But...
Right, exactly. But what we have to think about right now is we saw what happened in Michigan when you have armed right-wing protesters storming the Capitol to try and intimidate the governor and the legislature to open up the state early. You've got federal troops, as we said, well, not troops, but federal agencies, armed officers in Portland. We're talking. We saw today in Louisville what had been a brewing situation going back to the death of Breonna Taylor, where you now have a white armed militia showing up and a black armed militia, which they call themselves the NFAC, the No Fucking Around Coalition, and you've got cops, trying to keep these people separate. Just push forward now to election day, and these militias decide they're going to try and show up to support, to quote protect unquote their voters. And then in between that are the feds then also going to stick to impose themselves in there, and to the point is that seeing this, people are going to be, forget about COVID is out there too, but the voters are going to be very, very scared to go to the polls because a civil war could break out. And I hate to use that phrase, but there are a number of places that are getting where the tension is starting to get so great that it's not out of the question to ponder that.
Well, particularly
here's
a couple of the swing states of this major election, potential swing states of this major election, are states like Texas and North Carolina that have much more lenient gun laws.
Georgia.
More gun, and I mean, Pennsylvania does not have as strict gun laws as, say, New York, but they're still, more strict than North Carolina and Florida and Texas. And go ahead.
Well, and here's the other thing. In my mind, this is horrible because our Constitution was set up very deliberately about things like this, between what the Fed's powers were, what the states, and we have certainly amended that. But let's talk about, these are the overt things that we're seeing on the news. So let's talk about the more, I can't think of the word that is opposite of overt, so sorry. The more subtle things that are happening. Woody Johnson, ambassador to the Court of St. James in the UK, lobbying the Secretary of State of Ireland to get the British Open on Trump's Turnberry. Michael Cohen going back to, and I'm no fan of Michael Cohen,
Absolutely.
Going back to jail for a week to silence him because he's writing a tell-all book about Trump. So these are some of the examples that we know about. What are all the examples that we don't know about? The inspectors general being in whatever, pin a tail on the donkey and figure out what agency we're talking about, who are silenced and who choose to leave. The fact that there has been nothing done about the Russians' bounty on our troops.
That was like, that happened, what, 3 or 4 years ago, right? Yeah. Was that 3 or 4 years ago that happened? Yeah, no, it was 2 weeks ago.
And again, I know this guy is your favorite guy, Tom, but I think about all the shit that President George W. took during Hurricane Katrina because he followed the Constitution and wouldn't send in National Guard, the troops, until he had a signed declaration of emergency from the state's governor. And it, there were a lot of things he did wrong in that, but that was not one of them. And when she wouldn't sign it, had to bring her aboard Air Force One to say, I can't do anything until you allow us to, because this is the way the Constitution is set up. But the flagrant, just thumbing his nose at the Constitution of the United States. So I agree with you. It's only going to get worse.
I have a question. Is it possible for local, like state government officials to mandate mail-in ballots for everyone, or for a federal election? Because I think I'm trying to think of a silver lining, and I'm wondering, like, obviously, like, he's definitely losing support of state representatives because he's sending in these militias without their knowledge. The governors are waking up and finding out that they're there when they're there, just like the citizens. So I'm wondering if there's a way that the state, governors and reps can mandate that everyone gets a mail-in ballot at least.
It differs state by state.
Right.
Like sometimes it has to be pushed through legislation, but I think what they all can do, and I know what they did in New York, is that you don't need to provide a justification for why you need an absentee ballot. Like normally you have to have some justification. And what they changed for this election, like I don't think we officially have mail-in balloting in New York State,
Right.
but they waived any justification. So I did a mail-in ballot because COVID. And
in New Jersey,
I believe every governor could do that.
Yeah, that was the big difference between, say, New York and New Jersey is that Andrew Cuomo has basically, I think, allowing send an application to everybody, and then they send it back, and then they get the actual ballot. New Jersey just cut that part out and just sent everybody a ballot. And at least one major New York newspaper has recommended to Governor Cuomo that he just cut that part out and send it. Of course, modesty prevents me from saying which major New York daily newspaper did that. But,
you're gonna go with major as a word to describe it, huh?
Yeah.
Sorry. I always say, like, I don't, for a zillion reasons, don't weigh in too much on local politics on this show, for those who know me. I will simply say, like, I think Phil Murphy, underrated hero of a lot of the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, Cuomo has rightly gotten a lot of accolades. I think Phil Murphy has not gotten nearly as many as he deserves, because I think
I'd agree with that.
He's done a really good job of managing things swiftly and just sort of cutting through a lot of bureaucratic red tape. I think so. Let's expand it a little bit, like in terms of the ongoing, the secret police lack of. I think another question that people have, and I think we kind of don't talk enough about, is why local governments have a sort of weird role here. I think last week the mayor of Portland was in a crowd that was tear gassed by some of these people, while his own police force was providing security for these forces because, like, of certain legal obligations that a local government has towards a federal government force. But I think what I hear a lot of people asking about, and I think we should talk about a little bit here, why what more can a local government do to sort of stop this kind of behavior? Like New York is, and a few other cities have mentioned taking them to court if they try and institute on the streets. The rule that the federal government has been using to justify their presence is that they do have the right to protect federal government buildings, and federal government buildings have been graffitied on and protested in front of. So that's
so much more important
at the
than human rights.
expense of citizens' lives.
Yeah, that's the legal loophole that they have.
In rental vans.
Yeah, but it's a building, Kate.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
What do you expect them to power wash that off? Come on.
Yeah.
You find me some new columns in a pandemic.
But the difference is that when the feds are asked to come in, that's the key word. They are asked by either local jurisdictions, a governor, a secretary of state. They are usually invited in. They're like vampires. They're invited in.
Yep.
You know,
Just
so
how you guys always win, calling the federal government vampires. I can already see the wheels turning for I can see a year from today when Ann Herberger's like, Joe Biden's a vampire. Let's get him.
I would believe that.
Buy the garlic stock.
yeah.
But I guess that's the question I think on everyone's mind is like, what else can local governments do? Like and I'd say from what you're saying here, like you think there's already a pretty strong constitutional case to say like to go to court and kick these people out.
Absolutely, because it deals with states' rights with the federal government. It deals with state jurisdiction. It deals with that the feds can't, again, this is how our country was set up, that the federal government can't overtake a state. I mean, it's not like this is the Civil War where the South decides to secede from, the Union, basically. This is the federal government trying to usurp local, county, and state jurisdiction. So yeah, I think there's a hell of a case to be made from every jurisdiction back to the feds to strengthen that line. And again, I am just amazed that this guy has never,
There's a and I forgive me, I'm forgetting what the law exactly. I'm forgetting what the law, which law it is, but there is a law out there that says that does give certain federal troops, like border protection, for example, a lot greater leeway to operate within 100 miles of the border, which actually takes up a fair amount of space in the country. I mean, if you're talking about Portland, for example, and the border being the West Coast, that gives the federal authorities a lot of flexibility in terms of their main responsibility, if they've got a explicit legitimate role, it would be to protect federal buildings that are important. So if there are people literally attacking the federal courthouse, which when I say, and I'm talking about physically attacking, the federal courthouse was graffitied, and they may have thrown rocks through the window before the feds come in. Once the feds came in, it provoked reaction, and then so that's where you started seeing all this video of protesters, wanting to smash their way in, which of course then gives the feds even more quote authority to respond. The point is they've got much larger leeway to do these things, which is why you want Congress to start speaking up and saying, wait a minute. This is overstepping the bounds.
It is not lost on me that Republic. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
We both looked it up. It's the Insurrection Act of 1807.
Which Thomas Jefferson wrote because Aaron Burr was pissed that he got bullied for killing Hamilton and then went off to try and go steal.
Everyone's making fun of me for killing a founding father.
Yeah.
It all comes back to Hamilton, I tell you.
That is the thing I thought about after watching that, was just like everyone's like, oh, Aaron Burr, kind of a sympathetic figure. It's like he did raise an army against the country shortly after
Hamilton
losing
was
the
also
governorship.
An asshole. Hamilton was also an asshole. They
You
were all assholes. I will say though, I also think that going back to the militias, I think that it's really important for, like the mayor of Portland, for state government and officials to be on the front lines. As like, I'm not that as involved in politics, as Robert and Ann are, but like, I think as someone who is, layman activist, I think it's important that we don't allow the president to continue to this narrative of demonizing these peaceful protesters and people who are standing up for human rights and racial equality as the bad guys, but rather if they were on the front lines as well, like seeing the mayor get tear gassed on top of the other protesters I think really clearly demonstrates the kind of chaos that's happening. No one knows who's on what side or what's happening. It's just violence, and people are getting abducted into rental vans, and people are getting really hurt, and someone's gonna get killed if they haven't already from these, militias being brought in. So I think that it's important, if state government officials care about their citizens, that they're on the front lines with them.
Yeah, what a world where the people on the left are arguing for states' rights and the people on the right are like, it's what a mind fuck this year has been. I don't think we appreciate the gravity of how much things have shifted in such a short amount of time.
Right.
It depends on the state.
That's part of it. Like, we're arguing states' rights, and like states are like, hey, we have the right to do this, and the federal government's like, no, fuck you, we're gonna march troops and occupy you. And we've considered that to be normal. Like, we've normalized it.
A thing I find interesting about it, I want to move on to another subject, but this is a thing that I hadn't thought about until the end of the week. Not lost on me that we're saying, what is Congress saying? I wish Congress were saying more in the whole, but what are Republicans saying about this action? Not much. And like, that means the part of me is like, ugh, where are these guys? But it's also, they're not rushing to the president's aid on this one. They're not trumpeting him and agreeing with him. I mean, a few, maybe Tom Cotton is, but you haven't heard much from the leadership of the party or the more prominent voices. They're very focused on Goya
and you did. And one of the people though who did actually speak out against the Portland was Rand Paul. And we've had issues with him not speaking out and pushing back against Trump before, but he spoke out and said, the local police should be able to take care of simple vandalism and crime and things like that, and the federal officials and agents should not be there. So kudos there.
Well, and Liz Cheney, who is the majority leader, correct? No,
she's number 3 in the
minority leader.
Yeah, so it's
but
McCarthy.
If she's as good of a shot as her father, she'll be number 1 in no time.
But similarly, Liz Cheney is the only one who has dared to go against this president, and all these Republicans that are, basically Trumpophiles are calling for her to step down from leadership, that she shouldn't run, and, good for her for speaking up.
And I certainly, to my Republican colleagues here, appreciate greatly what that means to you. But I do think the other side of it is interesting to me is that we've got a few Republicans speaking up. We have a few speaking against it, a few speaking for it. But I think my bellwether is Mike Pence, and he's staying as far away from this part of the Trump administration as he gets.
I forgot he existed.
That is a very It's a very interesting thing to me. Like, that tells me that the party is like, ooh, this is a no good for us.
Yeah, no good.
But fortunately, when it comes to, I had such a seamless transition. Go ahead, Robert.
I'm sorry, Tom. Please go right ahead. I keep forgetting you're the host. Please go right ahead.
Something, which is weird. It's too late. It's thrown out. So I'll just simply say it was a transition about Republicans.
Edit it.
Just make it as awkward as you
normally
can.
not being afraid to say what they think. Speaking of which, Ted Yoho.
Yeah.
There it is. Congressman Ted Yoho of Florida, set to retire this fall.
Not soon enough.
Reportedly, I'll be fair, in an altercation with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, my neighbor up here in Parkchester, while she was walking away from him on the Capitol steps in a conversation about the effects of poverty on crime, referred to her by 2 words that, I don't even feel comfortable saying them, so I won't say them. If anyone else wants to say them, you can. But
fucking bitch.
There you go. Thank you, Kate Moran. Which led to Representative Ocasio-Cortez taking the floor after Representative Yoho offered what could be called an apology, although he refused to apologize.
That was not an apology.
He refused.
He made it sound like he was attacked on his religion and his family when he was the asshole in the situation.
He explicitly said he wouldn't apologize, which is what I found interesting in what has now been referred to by Leader McCarthy as an apology.
He apologized for his I think he said something like my rough demeanor, or
I will not apologize for my passion.
for my passion, my patriotism, my love of country and love of God, and yes, exactly.
This led
Your standard white man apology.
Yep. Let me tell you.
I can vouch for that. That's true.
Yeah. When in doubt, that's what I say. But this led to Ocasio-Cortez to offer a statement on the floor, and she was joined in support, and not just in joined in support by her regular allies in the progressive left, but even some moderate voices came out. I think Debbie Wasserman Schultz, not exactly beloved by the people who put Ocasio-Cortez in office, came out and offered, I thought, a really strong statement that it was an impressive moment where they didn't just, she explicitly said she wasn't asking for an apology from him, but simply calling out the language that men, in everywhere, not just government, use towards women. It was a heck of a moment. I was surprised. I'll tell you what surprised me, and I'm interested. I was surprised that Yoho would say this, because I don't know if you guys know this, but he's a father of daughters and a husband of a wife, the son of a mother, and presumably client of bank workers who are women. So I can't believe he would say something sexist. They never do. Right?
I bet she also has a black friend too.
Nah, let's not go that far.
Let's not go that
far. He definitely doesn't have a black friend.
Well, someone who's like pretty tan.
Yeah.
But he's from Florida, so he may have somebody with a spray-on tan. So that is a good point.
The minute Kate Moran said he probably has a black friend, somewhere Tim Scott just said, no, he doesn't, and doesn't know why he said that. He just, no, he doesn't. What am I talking about? Go home. No. I think this became an interesting sort of touch point for the week. Conversation about language that is used towards women, and not just in government, but particularly we've seen, I'll put it this way, in a world where our president, when the cameras are off but still with a reporter, is comfortable saying what he, where he will grab certain women by, it's an attitude towards women that is permitted all across our culture, not just politics. And it created an interesting conversation to close off the week. Also, again, living in the neighborhood that she lives in, and being one of her constituents, kicked off really great fundraising strategy from her part
right.
as well.
I think it's
thoughts on it.
It's one of those things that's I think it's so repugnant to say to any woman, but to say it to a member of Congress,
right,
just felt especially galling. Because I mean, he doesn't like her policies. He doesn't like this, that, or the other thing about her. But she's an elected representative from Congress. He's not just saying that to her, he's saying that to all of her constituents.
Correct.
And I don't think he grasped the gravity of what that meant, that he's not just screaming, you effing B at one woman. He's saying that to an entire section of New York. He doesn't just owe her an apology. I think he owes New York an apology.
Well, and it goes
We're
back
good.
Or you go at somebody.
And go ahead.
And it goes back to, and we, our good friend on this panel, Robert George, threw out some ideas on Twitter this week that a lot of us were tagged in. And for, I agree with you, Andrew. The decorum of the House and the Senate is there's a reason that they refer to each other as the distinguished gentleman from Florida, the distinguished gentlewoman from New York. It violates the decorum of the House, and I know that's a minor point to make, but you're right. And all too often, in the last, I'd say, especially 10 years, it's just too easy for a man to say that fucking bitch, because if a man did it, he would be assertive or, strong. But if a woman stands up for herself, especially in Congress, and, she's a bitch, and that it is not acceptable in any way, shape, or form. And frankly, I also think he owes the House, his colleagues in the House of Representatives an apology. There is no way in hell that any of his arguments fly for this, and he should be retired.
I think also my friend and comedian Celeste Jennings mentioned this on Instagram. She said that if this had happened in a corporate setting, he would have been facing severe punishment immediately. Like, you say that to a colleague in the private sector, you're facing, possible suspension, if not being fired. So I think we should force him to take sexual harassment training for 6 weeks.
Oh, man.
I'll just quickly say, and to respond to Anne's point, I did put out this thread, and I realized when I was doing it, when I was hitting send, I knew I was going to get a lot of pushback on it, and it was a nuanced maybe an overthought point, and obviously everybody knows nuance really works well on Twitter, but I was making the point that, well, first of all, the reporter in the Hill who observed this, he says that Yoho didn't call AOC, did not actually say fucking bitch to her face. After they had this encounter, he storms off and starts muttering effing bitch. Now, whether that's but I just want to make sure how it was reported. And the point I had, again, it was a narrow one, saying that if Yoho wanders off, had a similar encounter with, Ro Kahana or something like that, wanders off and says it's fucking asshole or something like that, nobody cares. I was making the point that that bitch and asshole, if you're talking about colleagues who don't like each other, those are some of the things that sometimes get said under the breath. So, I tagged people. I tagged women I'm friends with and I have a great deal of respect for, and asking them how they thought about this, and I got a lot of good, great and informative and beneficial pushback at explaining why my contrast between bitch and asshole wasn't fair, and which is fine. But that's why I put it out. That's why I put it out there, because sometimes I think it's good to have these kind of conversations rather than just to think, oh well, maybe yes, maybe no. So that's
but
basically
he's an
why.
elected official, though. That's the thing.
No. I know he's an elected official. He's an elected official. But let me tell you this: there are a lot of Republicans who, not just under their own breath, will call Ted Cruz a fucking asshole or something like that, and sometimes to his face. My point is, the decorum that we see that's supposed to be on the floor is not always seen when it's off the floor.
I want to give everyone a chance to respond to that. Let's get Robert. No, but I think an important thing to note, Robert, you're right. Like, that context of where it was said is important to the story and relevant. However, you and I know, and I don't know, I know Robert and Ann, you've worked in politics. Andrew, Kate, I don't know what level of experience you may have working this. You know as well as I do that, the steps of the Capitol, or, like the rotundas at your state capitals and city halls, where the press are, where everyone else is not really private. Even muttering it under your breath, you are accepting that's like I have friends who have been elected officials who have described to me what they call their like neutral face, which is, that's when, which they they sort of equated to the little spinny pinwheel you get on a Mac, which says, like, once I'm around reporters, even if I've just talked to someone who I think is a fucking asshole, like, I shut down because they might hear it. Like, on some level, like, I wouldn't say that is even if it's under your breath, nice, like, Andrew. You're still basically, very nice, Andrew.
Classically trained.
Demonstrating that face right now. That you, like, I think, I'll give as much leeway as I can to someone losing their cool, but what you mean when you say that, and that you are in a place where people will hear it and report on it.
But he also just didn't say fucking bitch. He talked to her directly and said, you're disgusting, you're deplorable, he insulted her. And then she said, you're being rude, and he got mad and said, oh, I'm being rude. And then as she was walking away, he said fucking bitch. So it wasn't just him walking by and being like, oh, fucking bitch. Like, it wasn't high school hallway talk. Like, he attacked her verbally, accosted her. And I'm sorry, but it's like saying that calling someone a Karen is the same thing as calling someone the N-word in a different way, in a different context. But I think when you talk about loaded terms that are gender-based, it's a completely different conversation in my mind. Like, I think like calling Ted Cruz an asshole, it has a different connotation than calling AOC a bitch.
Anyone can be an asshole, but when you use the word bitch, it's such a targeted sexist term. It means something. It holds a lot more weight than asshole.
Yeah, well, but as I did say, point out, it is rare. It is rare. It does happen, but it is rare to for a woman to be called an asshole.
Not in my house growing up. You should meet my mom, Robert.
I lived such a sheltered life. I'm sorry. By the way, one thing I do want to say, one thing I agree 100% is that AOC's calling him out on the really trite response of, well, as the brother of sisters and the father of daughters, that's been a ploy that
customer of waitresses.
But it is the updated equivalent of some of my best friends are black. I mean, it's just pure. Yeah, if once it's out there and you've been called out as being sexist, the smart thing is to do saying is I apologize for offending my colleague, and then go up.
Not just smart, the right thing to do.
The deconstruction, AOC's, she's, and this is something I've told other people as well. Look, you may not agree with AOC on a number of topics, and I think I think her views on Green New Deal and things like that are way left and ridiculous. But she's a brilliant politician. She's really smart. She knows when to zero in on a particular topic, expand it, and deconstruct what's going on there, and how to articulate it for the folks at home. And that's one of the reasons that's one of the reasons that really she drives Republicans really crazy.
But also, I think a good lesson for Democrats there that we never learn enough is that a lot of times Democrats misunderstand the Michelle Obama quote from 4 years ago, that when they go low, we go high. We misunderstand that to believe just shake it off. No, I mean, it's stand up.
That was Taylor Swift, Tom. That was
thank
something.
You. All right, thank you. We misunderstand. It means stand up and call it out, and that is what AOC did, and it's a good lesson. Don't let them off the hook. Call them out. And I'd say there are other Democrats who do a very good job of this, and but not enough in my view. I think we're gonna leave it there, unless anyone else wants to just correct Robert on his.
I just want to add one more point to that, is that I think everything that Robert's saying is totally salient. I think it's also about the idea of equity versus equality. I think that until we can see a real change in how rapists and molesters and abusers and domestic violence perpetrators are treated and punished in this country, then you can call me a fucking bitch all you want. You know what I mean? I think until we can change this country's deep-seated misogyny and violence against women, and of course queer people and people of color, let's just lump it all in because we're terrible, then you can call me whatever the fuck you want.
That is, oof. I think I have an episode title.
I'd like to thank my learned colleague Kate Moran for that fine statement that you just made
there. With that, we will call it a week. I'm stammering. I don't know what happened. I had it put together, and then I've been working I've been working on my uhs and stammers. Nope, leaving it in. I got to learn.
Authenticity.
Thank you so much for joining us, Andrew Kimler. Thank you so much for joining us, Kate Moran. Thank you very much, Ann Herberger. And thank you, Robert George. And then a quick thanks, first of all, again, to our guest director, Mr. Brian Colvin, for sitting in for Ned Thorne this week. Thank you so much. Thank you to Kevin Scott for the show animation. Thank you very much to Joanne Harris for the show theme song. Thank you very much, Declan Shalvey and Jordy Belair for the show Eagle Art. And before we throw it over to the musical guest, just want to say to very good friend of this show and very good friend of mine, Wally Oram, I love you, buddy. And with that, we're going to throw it over to this week's musical guest, back by popular demand, Megan Sass. Yay. Brian, star wipe us over to Megan.
thank you, Tom, for having me back. I am once again Megan Sass. Glad to be back. Megan Sass drinking from her Wonder Woman glass. My cat Sterling is in the background. He could make an unexpected appearance. He could add some unnecessary percussion. Any of these things could happen. I don't think I need to intro the song too hard. It's political. It's a little bit of satire. I think you're going to get what it's about. Here we go. Well, the world is changing around me. It's not the way it used to be. Why should I trust reason or science when I've got my own memory? I'd like to have power, I'd like to have wealth. I'd like some trophies to hang on my shelf. I'd like my leaders to offer some help to me and to people like me. So I'll just stand in my corner. I'll just shout from my chair. In my own little country, in my present state, I'd rather scream now than just listen and wait. It's harder to hear, so it's easier to hate the person who screams over there. Oh, how I long for the good times, their joy and security. Though I may not have looked very closely, things sure appeared good to me. There were no shades of gray, just white and black. Those who thought different weren't cut no slack. The world will be better when it goes back to how I misremember it to be. So I'll just stand in my corner. I'll just shout from my chair. In my own little country, in my present state, I'd rather scream now than just listen and wait. It's harder to hear, so it's easier to hate the person who screams over there. Well, I no longer feel comfort. My nation is taking a turn. My feelings are infallible. That's what the rest of you need to learn. I know I'm no longer in my element. I've a creeping suspicion I'm less relevant. If I feel discomfort, I can't be content. I'd rather just watch the world burn. Oh, I'll just stand in my corner. I'll just shout from my chair. In my own little country, in my present state, I'd rather scream now than just listen and wait. It's harder to hear, so it's easier to hate the person who screams over there. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Electoral Dysfunction. I'm Megan Sass. See you next time.